Most people have walked past this penny without a second thought. But what if I told you a single 1965 Lincoln penny could be hiding a story of national crisis, metal shortages, and collector surprises that still shock people today? Let's talk about the 1965 no mint mark Lincoln penny, one of the most misunderstood coins in American history, and one that quietly carries a powerful story from one of the most turbulent years of the 20th century. At first glance, this coin looks ordinary. It shows Abraham Lincoln on the front, just like billions of other pennies. The back features the familiar Lincoln memorial design. There's no mint mark beneath the date, which usually means it was made in Philadelphia. Nothing about it seems special. And yet, 1965 was not an ordinary year for American coins. It was a turning point. To understand why this penny matters, we need to go back to the early 1960s. At the time, the United States was facing a serious coin shortage. People were hoarding silver coins because silver prices were rising. Dimes, quarters, and half dollars were disappearing from circulation. Vending machines, parking meters, and businesses were struggling to make change. The situation became so bad that Congress passed a major law in 1965 to change how American coins were made. That law, known as the Coinage Act of 1965, removed silver from most circulating coins and made big changes to the way the U.S. Mint operated. One of the most surprising changes was that mint marks were temporarily removed from all coins. The government believed collectors were hoarding coins from certain mints, which worsened the shortage. So for several years, starting in 1965, coins were produced without mint marks, even those made outside Philadelphia. That means something unusual happened. Pennies struck in Denver and San Francisco during this time also carried no mint mark, just like Philadelphia coins. Today, when you see a 1965 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, it could have been made at any of these mints. There's no way to tell just by looking. This alone makes the coin historically fascinating. Now let's talk about the coin itself. On the front, or obverse, we see the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner. This design was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, making it the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. By 1965, Americans had already been seeing Lincoln's face on pennies for more than half a century. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial appears, a design introduced in 1959. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, making this one of the few U.S. coins where the same person appears on both sides. The metal composition of the 1965 penny is also important. These coins were made mostly of copper, about 95% copper, with the rest being zinc and tin. This was the same composition used for most pennies from 1909 through 1982, before copper prices rose too high, and the mint switched to cheaper materials. Today, the copper in a 1965 penny alone is worth more than its face value, which already makes it interesting to collectors and metal investors. But what truly makes this penny stand out is not just how it looks or what it's made of. It's what was happening behind the scenes when it was struck. 1965 was the first year after mint marks were removed. The mint was under pressure to produce massive numbers of coins as fast as possible to fix the nationwide shortage. As a result, quality control sometimes slipped. That created opportunities for errors, mistakes that slipped through and entered circulation. And in the coin world, mistakes can mean big money. Some 1965 pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design is shifted to one side of the coin. Others were double-struck, where part of the design appears twice. There are also examples with die cracks, clipped planchets, or missing details. While most of these errors are small, some dramatic examples have sold for hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on condition and severity. One of the most talked about possibilities surrounding the 1965 penny involves metal composition errors. In 1964, some experimental pennies were made using different metal blends as the mint tested alternatives. A few rare transitional errors from nearby years have surfaced over time. While confirmed 1965 pennies struck on silver planchets are extremely rare and controversial, any unusual weight or color on a 1965 penny is something collectors take seriously. So how rare is the 1965 no mint mark Lincoln penny? In terms of sheer numbers, not rare at all. Over 1 billion pennies were struck in 1965. That makes it one of the most common Lincoln cents ever produced. Most examples you'll find today are worth only a few cents over face value, especially if they're worn or damaged. But rarity in coin collecting doesn't always mean low mintage. It can also mean rare condition, rare errors, or rare historical context. And this coin has all three possibilities. In high-grade condition, especially coins that were never circulated and still have their original red copper color, values rise quickly. A standard 1965 penny in uncirculated condition might sell for $1 to $5, but a top-grade example certified by a professional grading service can sell for $20, $50, or more, depending on quality. Now let's talk about real auction results. Some 1965 Lincoln pennies graded MS67 or higher, meaning nearly perfect condition, have sold at major auctions for over $100. Error coins from this year have sold for far more. Off-center strikes, broad strikes, and dramatic doubled dies have fetched prices ranging from $300 to over $2,000, depending on rarity and eye appeal. There have also been reports of experimental metal errors and unusual planchet strikes tied to the mid-1960s coinage changes. When verified, these can bring life-changing money. While extremely rare, these stories are part of what keeps collectors searching through old jars, piggy banks, and inherited collections. So how can you tell if your 1965 penny is something special? Start with the basics. First, check the date. It should read 1965 and there should be no mint mark under the date. That's normal for this year. Next, look at the color. Original copper pennies from this era should have a rich reddish or brown tone. If the coin looks silver, gray, or unusually pale, that could indicate damage or something more interesting. Weigh the coin. A normal 1965 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it's significantly heavier or lighter, that could suggest a wrong planchet error. Then examine the strike. Is the design centered? Are letters missing? Do any parts of the design look doubled or distorted? Use a magnifying glass and good lighting. Even small details can make a big difference in value. Also check the edge. A normal penny should have a smooth edge and solid copper color. Any unusual texture, gaps, or strange patterns deserve closer inspection. If something seems off, don't clean the coin. Cleaning can destroy collector value instantly. Instead, place it in a protective holder and consider having it examined by a professional coin dealer or grading service. Now let's clear up one common myth. Many people believe that any 1965 penny without a mint mark is automatically rare or worth thousands of dollars. That's not true. Most of them are common and worth only a few cents. The value comes from condition, errors, and unusual characteristics, not just the date. But that doesn't mean these coins aren't worth keeping. Far from it. The 1965 penny represents a major turning point in U.S. coin history. It marks the moment when silver disappeared from everyday money and when mint marks temporarily vanished from American coins. It's a snapshot of a nation responding to economic pressure, metal shortages, and changing times. Here's a surprising fact. During 1965, the mint continued striking some coins dated 1964 even into 1966. This was done to discourage hoarding and keep coins flowing. That means the date on a coin from this era doesn't always match the year it was actually made. This unusual practice makes the mid-1960s one of the most confusing and fascinating periods in U.S. coinage. Another fun detail is that because mint marks were removed, collectors today cannot tell whether their 1965 penny was made in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. It's one of the few times in modern U.S. history where that information is permanently lost. Every 1965 penny carries a mystery inside it, its birthplace. Collectors also love this coin because it sits at the crossroads of tradition and change. It still uses the classic copper composition that Americans had known for generations. It still shows the beloved Lincoln Memorial design. But behind the scenes, the entire U.S. monetary system was shifting. This penny is a quiet witness to that transformation. For new collectors, the 1965 penny is often a starting point. It's easy to find, affordable, and full of learning opportunities. For experienced collectors, it's a hunting ground for rare heirs and top-condition survivors. For historians, it's a symbol of how economic forces shape everyday objects, even something as small as a penny. And then there's the emotional side. Millions of Americans alive today handled these coins as children. They bought candy with them, dropped them in fountains, saved them in jars, and forgot about them in drawers. These pennies passed through countless hands during a time of social change, cultural upheaval, and technological progress. Each one carries a silent story of where it's been. Imagine finding a 1965 penny that somehow survived untouched for nearly 60 years. No scratches, no wear, still glowing with its original copper shine. That coin would be like a time capsule from the middle of the 20th century, a tiny, preserved piece of history. So why does this penny still matter today? Because it reminds us that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes what looks ordinary carries extraordinary stories. Sometimes the most common objects are the ones closest to moments of major change. And sometimes, hidden among billions of coins, there are rare survivors that defy the odds. The 1965 no-mint mark Lincoln penny may not be the rarest coin in America. It may not always be worth thousands of dollars, but it holds something even more powerful, a connection to a moment when the nation's money system was reshaped, when tradition met transformation, and when even the smallest coin reflected a much bigger story. So the next time you see a penny dated 1965, don't dismiss it. Pick it up. Look at it closely. Think about where it's been. Think about what it's seen. And remember that sometimes history doesn't live in museums or vaults. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in your pocket, waiting to be noticed. And who knows, the next one you check might not just tell a story. It might change yours. Most people walk past this penny every day without a second thought. But what if I told you a tiny coin from 1968 could quietly hold a story of American history, hidden mistakes, and collector excitement that still surprises people today? Stay with me, because the 1968 Lincoln penny is far more interesting than it looks. This coin is called the 1968 Lincoln cent. It's a 1-cent coin made at the San Francisco Mint, marked with a small letter S below the date. At first glance, it looks like just another copper penny. But behind that simple design is a fascinating story tied to a turning point in American coin production, and in some cases, serious collector value. Let's go back to the year 1968. The United States was in the middle of massive social and economic change. The Vietnam War was ongoing, inflation was rising, and the country was still recovering from a nationwide coin shortage that began in the early 1960s. People had started hoarding coins because the metal inside them was becoming more valuable, and vending machines and cash registers were running short on change. Because of this shortage, the U.S. Mint had removed mint marks from coins between 1965 and 1967 to discourage collectors from pulling specific coins out of circulation. But in 1968, mint marks officially returned. That's why the small S on this penny matters. It marked the first year in 3 years that Americans could once again tell where their coins were made. The San Francisco Mint had also taken on a new role by this time. Instead of producing large quantities of regular coins for circulation, it focused mainly on proof coins, which are specially struck coins made for collectors. These coins are sharper, shinier, and more detailed than everyday pocket change. However, in 1968, San Francisco also struck some regular circulation pennies, and that's where the 1968 Lincoln cent becomes especially interesting. On the front of the coin, you'll see Abraham Lincoln's portrait, a design that had been used since 1909, the 100th anniversary of his birth. Lincoln faces right, with the word liberty to the left, the year 1968 to the right, and just below the date the small letter S, showing it was minted in San Francisco. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to honor the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. Inside the memorial, if you look closely, you can even see a tiny seated statue of Lincoln, making this one of the few U.S. coins to feature the same person on both sides. The metal composition of the 1968 penny is also important. It's made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, which gives it that warm reddish-brown color when new. Each coin weighs about 3.11 grams and measures 19 millimeters across. These were the last full copper pennies before the U.S. Mint switched to copper-plated zinc cents in the early 1980s. Now here's where things get interesting. There are actually two main versions of the 1968 penny. One is the regular business strike made for circulation. The other is the proof version made specifically for collectors. Proof coins are struck using specially polished dies and blanks, creating mirror-like backgrounds and frosted designs. Even today, when you see a 1968 proof penny in its original condition, it almost looks like a tiny copper mirror. But not all 1968 pennies are equal. Some have small differences that collectors obsess over, and some contain errors that dramatically increase their value. One of the most famous varieties is the 1968 double die obverse penny. On these coins, parts of the date and lettering appear doubled, especially in words like liberty and in God we trust. This doubling happened when the die used to strike the coin was misaligned during manufacturing. Instead of producing a clean image, it left a slightly shifted second impression. These doubled die pennies are rare, and collectors search rolls of old pennies hoping to find one. In circulated condition, they can sell for hundreds of dollars. In higher grades, especially uncirculated examples, they can reach into the thousands. Another interesting error involves repunched mint marks. Back in 1968, mint marks were still punched into coin dies by hand. Sometimes, the mint worker didn't align the punch correctly the first time, so they punched it again, leaving overlapping or doubled S marks. These repunched mint mark varieties are subtle, but once you see one under magnification, you'll never forget it. There are also off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and coins struck on improperly prepared blanks. While these errors are not unique to the 1968 penny, collectors value them because they show how even a massive operation like the U.S. Mint can produce mistakes. So why would anyone pay real money for a penny that originally cost 1 cent? It comes down to three things: condition, rarity, and demand. Most 1968 pennies were spent in circulation and eventually worn down. Finding one today in perfect condition, with full original luster and no damage, is surprisingly difficult. Copper coins are especially sensitive to fingerprints, scratches, and environmental damage. A single touch can leave a permanent mark. Then there's rarity. While millions of these pennies were made, truly high-grade examples, especially with proof-like surfaces or rare errors, are scarce. Collectors compete fiercely for the best specimens because registry sets and personal collections often focus on owning the finest known examples. And finally, there's demand. Lincoln cents are one of the most collected coins in the United States. Millions of people grew up searching through pocket change, coin jars, and rolls from the bank. The Lincoln penny feels familiar, nostalgic, and accessible, which makes even small varieties exciting to own. Now let's talk real numbers. A typical circulated 1968 S penny might only be worth a few cents more than face value, but a well-preserved, uncirculated example can sell for several dollars, sometimes more depending on color and strike quality. Red-colored copper coins, meaning they retain most of their original brightness, bring higher prices than brown or red-brown ones. Proof versions of the 1968 S penny, especially those still in their original government packaging, usually sell for a few dollars. But flawless proof coins graded at the highest levels by professional grading services can sell for much more. The real excitement comes with rare varieties and top-condition examples. A high-grade 1968 S double-die obverse penny has sold at auction for thousands of dollars. Some pristine proof examples graded at the very top have also reached four-figure prices, especially when demand is strong. One collector famously discovered a double-die 1968 S penny in a roll purchased from a local bank decades ago. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary cent, but under magnification, the doubling was unmistakable. That coin later sold at auction for several $1,000s, turning pocket change into a serious payday. So how do you know if you have a real 1968 S penny worth attention, and not just a common cent? Start by checking the date and mint mark. Look for 1968 with a small s below the date. If there's no mint mark, it was made in Philadelphia. If there's a D, it came from Denver. Only the S version is part of this story. Next, look closely at the lettering. Use a magnifying glass or a phone camera zoom. Check the words Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date itself. If the letters look doubled, thickened, or shadowed, you might be looking at a double-die variety. Then examine the mint mark. If the S looks doubled, tilted, or oddly shaped, it could be a repunched mint mark. These are subtle and require careful inspection, but they're worth checking. Also look at the overall condition. Is the coin bright and shiny or dull and dark? Are there scratches, stains, or corrosion? The better the condition, the higher the potential value. Be cautious of altered coins. Some people try to add fake mint marks to coins or manipulate surfaces to mimic errors. Real mint marks are part of the coin's design, not glued or carved on later. If you're unsure, a reputable coin dealer or grading service can help authenticate your coin. Now for some fun facts. The 1968 S penny marks the return of mint marks after a 3-year pause, making it historically important in modern U.S. coinage. It also comes from the first year that proof coins were made at the San Francisco Mint in the modern proof era, after proof production had briefly moved to Philadelphia in the mid-1960s. Another interesting detail is that proof coins from 1968 sometimes show stronger cameo contrast, where the design appears frosted against mirror-like fields. These cameo proofs are especially popular with collectors and can command higher prices than standard proofs. And here's something surprising. Even though millions of 1968 S pennies exist, most people have never closely examined one. Many sit unnoticed in jars, drawers, and old collections, their small S mint mark quietly overlooked. Collectors love this coin today because it sits at the crossroads of history, affordability, and discovery. It's not so rare that it's unreachable, but it's not so common that it's boring. It invites people to look closer, learn more, and experience the thrill of possibly finding something special in an everyday object. It also represents the end of an era. The 1968 S penny is part of the final generation of true copper cents, coins that feel heavier and warmer in the hand compared to modern zinc-based pennies. For many collectors, that alone makes it more appealing, and there's something deeply satisfying about holding a small piece of history. This coin passed through countless hands during one of the most turbulent decades in American life. It may have bought a newspaper during the moon race, sat in a pocket during a protest, or been dropped into a jukebox at a roadside diner. Every scratch and mark tells part of that journey. The best part is that these coins are still out there. You don't need to attend an expensive auction or travel to a museum to find one. You might already have one in your home. It could be sitting in a coffee can, a piggy bank, or a forgotten envelope of old change. All it takes is a few minutes, a magnifying glass, and a sense of curiosity. So the next time you see a penny dated 1968, don't toss it aside. Flip it over. Look for that small S, check the letters, study the surface. Because sometimes the smallest coins carry the biggest stories. And who knows? The next time you reach into your pocket or open an old coin jar, you might discover that a single penny is worth far more than 1 cent. You might just be holding a piece of American history, a collector's prize, or the start of a new passion you never expected. That's the quiet magic of the 1968 Lincoln penny. A tiny coin with a big story, still waiting to be noticed. Most people would walk past this penny without a second thought. But what if I told you a tiny S under the date could turn an ordinary-looking coin into something collectors search for every day? Today, we're diving into the story of the 1971 mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that looks simple on the surface but carries history, mystery, and surprising value potential in the palm of your hand. This coin is a 1 cent piece from 1971, struck at the San Francisco Mint. The small S below the date tells us exactly where it was made. Unlike most pennies that were created for everyday use, many of the 1971 pennies were specially struck as proof coins, meaning they were made with extra care, polished dies, and sharper detail for collectors rather than circulation. But to understand why this penny matters, we need to go back to the early 1970s. In 1971, America was in the middle of major change. The country was transitioning economically, culturally, and technologically. The Vietnam War was ongoing, inflation was rising, and the U.S. Mint was adjusting how coins were made and distributed. Just a few years earlier, in 1968, mint marks had returned to U.S. coins after a short break, and San Francisco had stopped making coins for circulation altogether. Instead, it became the main producer of proof coins for collectors. That's where the 1971 penny comes in. Instead of being dumped into bank rolls and cash registers, these coins were carefully packaged in proof sets and sold directly to the public. Each set contained beautifully struck examples of all U.S. coins for that year. For many Americans, owning a proof set became a tradition, something saved in drawers, closets, and safety deposit boxes, often forgotten for decades. And inside those sets was the 1971 Lincoln penny. The design on this coin follows the classic Lincoln memorial style that had been used since 1959. On the front, we see Abraham Lincoln's profile, designed by Victor David Brenner. His initials, VDB, are tucked at the bottom of the bust, just above the rim. The word liberty sits to the left, and in God we trust arches above his head. The date, 1971, sits on the right, with the small S mint mark just below it. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial dominates the design. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the building, a detail many people never notice until it's pointed out. The words United States of America curve along the top. 1 cent sits boldly at the bottom, and EPLURIBUS floats above the memorial. But what really sets the 1971 penny apart is how it was made. Most pennies from this era were struck in copper, made from a bronze alloy of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. The 1971 penny follows this same formula. It weighs about 3.11 grams and has a warm, reddish-brown tone when well preserved. But proof versions were struck differently. The blanks were specially polished, the dies were mirror-like, and each coin was struck at least twice to bring out sharp details and frosted designs. The result is a coin with deep mirror fields and crisp lettering that almost looks like it's floating above the surface. Now, you might be wondering, if millions of these coins were made, how could any of them be rare or valuable? That's where things get interesting. While the San Francisco Mint produced millions of proof pennies in 1971, not all of them survived in perfect condition. Proof coins are extremely sensitive. Even a tiny fingerprint, a slight scratch, or years of poor storage can reduce their quality dramatically. Collectors prize examples that look exactly as they did the day they left the mint, with no haze, no spots, and no damage. On top of that, certain varieties and errors exist, making some 1971 pennies much more desirable than others. One of the most talked about varieties is the 1971 proof penny with a double die obverse. This means parts of the design, especially the lettering or date, appear doubled due to a misalignment during the die-making process. These doubling effects can often be seen on words like liberty or in God we trust, and sometimes even on Lincoln's profile itself. Unlike machine doubling, which usually looks flat and shelf-like, true double die errors show rounded, clearly separated images. These are genuine mint mistakes, and collectors love them because they represent a moment when something went wrong inside the mint, creating a coin that was never supposed to exist. Another category of interest is cameo and deep cameo proof coins. A cameo proof has frosted designs that contrast beautifully against mirror-like backgrounds. A deep cameo takes that effect even further, with heavy frosting and strong contrast. These coins are much harder to find because the frosted effect wears off the dies quickly, meaning only the earliest strikes tend to show deep cameo contrast. So, what kind of prices are we talking about? Most ordinary 1971 proof pennies in average condition might sell for just a few dollars. But high-grade examples certified by professional grading services can sell for much more. Coins graded PR69 Deep Cameo, which means nearly perfect with strong contrast, often sell for anywhere from $50 to $150 or more, depending on demand. PR70 Deep Cameo coins, the highest grade possible, are extremely rare. These represent flawless coins with no visible imperfections even under magnification. Some of these have sold at auction for several $100s, and in certain cases, well over $1,000, especially when collector demand is high and the coin has exceptional eye appeal. Double die-proof examples can sell for even more. Depending on the strength of the doubling and the condition of the coin, prices can range from a few $100s to several $1,000s. The strongest examples in top condition are considered serious collectibles and are actively hunted by error coin specialists. But how can you tell if you have a real 1971 penny or something special versus just a normal coin? First, look for the mint mark below the date. It should be small, clean, and well-defined. Proof coins will have sharp details, mirror-like fields, and often squared-off rims compared to circulation strikes. Next, examine the surfaces. Proof coins reflect light almost like a mirror, while regular business strike pennies usually have a duller appearance. The designs on proof coins also appear more sharply struck, especially Lincoln's hair, cheekbone, and the fine lines in the memorial on the back. If you suspect doubling, use a magnifying glass and look closely at the lettering and numbers. True double dies will show rounded, separated lines, not flat or blurry shadows. When in doubt, professional grading services like PCGS and NGC can authenticate and grade your coin, which often increases its value and marketability. Now, let's talk about something that surprises many people. Even though the 1971 penny was never meant for circulation, some proof coins ended up in pocket change. Over the years, people broke open proof sets, spent coins by mistake, or used them during times when money was tight. That means it's technically possible, though rare, to find a proof penny in a roll of cents from the bank or in an old jar at home. Collectors sometimes call these accidental travelers, and finding one in circulation can feel like winning a small lottery. Here's another fun fact. The Lincoln cent design, which began in 1909, was the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical person. Before that, American coins mostly showed symbolic figures like liberty. By 1971, Lincoln had already been on the penny for over 60 years, and his image had become one of the most recognizable faces in American currency history. And yet, even after decades of use, small changes in minting techniques, materials, and quality control continue to create varieties and collectibles that keep the series exciting. Another surprising detail about the 1971 S penny is how it reflects the end of an era. Just a few years later, in 1982, the U.S. Mint would switch from copper to copper-plated zinc pennies to save money. That means the 1971 S penny belongs to the last generation of traditional heavy copper cents, giving it a special place in the timeline of American coinage. Collectors today love this coin for several reasons. First, it's affordable for beginners. Even high-quality proof examples can often be purchased for reasonable prices, making it an excellent entry point into coin collecting. Second, it offers the thrill of the hunt. Searching for deep cameo examples, doubled dies, or ultra-high-grade coins gives collectors a challenge that feels rewarding when they succeed. Third, it's a beautiful coin. The contrast between frosted designs and mirror surfaces on a well-preserved 1971 S-proof penny is striking, even to people who aren't serious collectors. And finally, it connects people to history. This small copper coin represents a specific moment in time, a year when the country was changing, when technology was advancing, and when everyday objects like coins were still being made with craftsmanship that many people today find nostalgic. So if you have a jar of old coins, a dusty drawer, or a forgotten proof set tucked away somewhere, the 1971 S Lincoln penny might be sitting quietly among them, waiting to be noticed. Take a closer look. Tilt it under the light. Check for that small S mint mark. Look for mirrored fields, frosted designs, and any unusual doubling. What seems like a simple penny could turn out to be something much more interesting and possibly more valuable than you ever expected. In the world of coin collecting, it's often the smallest details that make the biggest difference. And the next time someone hands you a penny, remember this. Every coin has a story, but some stories are hidden in plain sight, written in copper, sealed in time, and waiting for someone curious enough to uncover them. Most people walk past pennies without a second thought. But what if I told you one ordinary-looking 1978 penny could be hiding a story worth far more than 1 cent, and in rare cases, far more than most people ever expect? Today, we're diving into the 1978 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that millions of Americans have held, spent, or saved, yet very few truly understand. At first glance, it looks just like any other penny from your change jar. But behind its copper glow is a story of American history, changing money, hidden errors, and collector demand that continues to grow decades later. The 1978 Lincoln penny was struck in Philadelphia, and that's why it carries no mint mark beneath the date. At the time, Philadelphia did not place mint marks on cents, which often leads people to believe the coin is unusual just because it lacks a letter. In truth, the no mint mark simply means it came from the Philadelphia Mint, which produced billions of pennies each year to meet everyday demand across the country. The design features Abraham Lincoln on the front, a portrait originally created by sculptor Victor David Brenner in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. By 1978, this design had already been in use for nearly 70 years, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. On the reverse side, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design that debuted in 1959 and remained until 2008. If you've ever looked closely at that memorial, you may have noticed that Lincoln himself can be seen seated inside it, making this one of the few U.S. coins where the same person appears on both sides. To understand why the 1978 penny matters, you have to understand what was happening in America at the time. The late 1970s were years of rising inflation, energy shortages, and big economic changes. The cost of metals was climbing, and the U.S. Mint was beginning to rethink how it made coins. Copper prices were rising sharply, and officials knew that producing pennies from mostly copper might soon become too expensive. That's why 1978 sits right near the end of an era. Pennies struck that year were still made from 95% copper and 5% zinc, weighing about 3.11 grams each. Just 4 years later, in 1982, the mint switched to copper-plated zinc pennies, which feel lighter and contain far less copper. So the 1978 penny belongs to the final generation of traditional copper cents, making it especially appealing to collectors who appreciate old-school coin composition. In 1978 alone, the Philadelphia Mint produced more than 5 billion pennies. That's a staggering number. On the surface, that kind of production suggests the coin should be common and nearly worthless. And for the most part, circulated examples are worth only face value. But as with many coins, rarity isn't just about how many were made. It's about condition, errors, and survival in pristine form. One of the most fascinating things about the 1978 no mint mark penny is how dramatically its value can change based on quality. Most of these coins were heavily circulated and now show wear, scratches, dull color, and flattened details. But coins that were carefully preserved, especially those that never entered circulation, can be worth far more than 1 cent. Uncirculated examples with full red color, sharp details, and no visible marks are highly sought after. In top condition, graded by professional services, some 1978 pennies have sold for hundreds or even over $1,000. That's not because they're rare in quantity, but because they're rare in perfection. Beyond condition, collectors are especially interested in error coins from 1978. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the minting process, and even small mistakes can turn an ordinary coin into something extraordinary. One of the most famous errors for this year is the doubled die. This happens when the coin die receives a misaligned impression during its creation, causing letters or numbers to appear doubled on the finished coin. On some 1978 pennies, you can see doubling on the date, the word liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust." These doubled details aren't from wear or damage. They're part of the original strike, and that's what makes them so valuable. Another desirable error is the off-center strike, where the coin design isn't properly aligned on the blank planchet. Some 1978 pennies were struck with part of the design missing or shifted dramatically to one side. The more off-center the strike, while still showing the date, the more collectors tend to value it. Then there are broad strikes, where the coin is struck outside its retaining collar, causing it to spread wider than normal and lose its raised rim. These coins look unusual and immediately stand out in a pile of change. Die cracks, cud errors, and clip planchets are also found on some 1978 cents. While not every error commands high prices, the right combination of visibility, condition, and rarity can push values well into the hundreds of dollars. Now let's talk about real-world examples. In recent years, professionally graded 1978 no mint mark pennies in near-perfect condition have sold at major auctions for several $100s, with top-tier examples crossing the $1,000 mark. Error coins from this year, especially strong doubled dies or dramatic off-center strikes, have sold anywhere from $50 to several $100s depending on severity and grade. One particularly sharp doubled die example sold for several $100s after collectors competed for it, simply because the doubling was bold and easy to see without magnification. That kind of clarity is rare, and collectors prize coins that tell their story instantly. Even more modest errors, like light doubling or minor off-center strikes, often sell for $20 to $100, turning pocket change into something worth saving and studying. So how can you tell if your 1978 penny might be special? First, check the date. It should read 1978 with no letter beneath it. That confirms it came from the Philadelphia Mint. Next, look closely at the lettering and numbers. Use a magnifying glass or your phone camera. Look for doubling, especially on the edges of the numbers in the date, the word liberty, and in God we trust. True doubled dies will show clean, separated lines, not blurry shadows or wear. Then weigh the coin if you can. A genuine 1978 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it's significantly lighter, it could be damaged or altered. While counterfeit pennies are rare, altered coins do exist, especially when people try to fake errors by carving or reshaping details. Real mint errors usually show smooth metal flow and natural surfaces, not tool marks or rough edges. Also, check the edges and rim. Broad strikes often lack a raised rim, and off-center strikes may show blank areas where the design should be. Clipped planchets will have missing sections that look smooth and curved, not jagged. If you believe you've found something special, the best next step is professional grading and authentication. A reputable coin grading service can confirm whether your coin is genuine and assign it a grade, which plays a huge role in its market value. Now here's a fun fact many people don't know. The Lincoln Memorial reverse actually shows Lincoln seated inside the monument, meaning the 1978 penny technically features Lincoln twice. This detail is so tiny that most people never notice it, yet it adds charm and complexity to the design. It's one reason collectors appreciate this era of U.S. coinage. Another surprising detail is that pennies from this period contain enough copper that some people once hoarded them for metal value alone, especially when copper prices surged. While melting pennies is illegal, the fact that their metal content once exceeded face value adds another layer of intrigue to coins like the 1978 cent. Collectors also love this coin because it sits at the crossroads of tradition and transition. It belongs to the classic copper era, but comes from a modern time many people still remember. It's old enough to feel historical, yet young enough to be found in jars, drawers, and inherited collections across the country. For new collectors, the 1978 no-mint mark penny is a perfect entry point. It's affordable in most grades, widely available, and rich with educational value. You can learn about mint marks, coin composition, grading, and mint errors all from studying this single year. And for experienced collectors, high-grade examples and rare errors offer exciting challenges and meaningful investment opportunities. What makes this coin especially appealing is that it reminds us that history isn't always locked in museums or vaults. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in your pocket, waiting to be noticed. A penny that once bought candy, rode in cash registers, and passed through countless hands now carries stories of American industry, design, and economics. And perhaps the most powerful part of all is this: many valuable 1978 pennies haven't been discovered yet. They're still hiding in old jars, forgotten collections, and everyday change. Every time someone sorts through their coins, there's a small but real chance they'll uncover a doubled die, a pristine uncirculated piece, or a dramatic error that turns 1 cent into something extraordinary. So the next time you see a 1978 penny, don't dismiss it. Hold it up to the light, look closely at the date, study the letters, feel the weight of that solid copper, because sometimes the smallest objects carry the biggest surprises. And who knows? The next 1978 no-mint mark Lincoln penny you come across might not just be another coin. It might be a hidden piece of American history, a collector's treasure, or the start of a story you never expected to tell. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second thought. But what if I told you A single 1979 Denver Mint Lincoln penny could be hiding a story worth far more than 1 cent, and in rare cases, far more than anyone ever expected. Today, we're uncovering the true story behind the 1979 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny. This coin doesn't usually grab headlines. It doesn't sparkle with silver. It doesn't come from the Civil War era. And yet, for collectors, this ordinary-looking penny holds secrets, history, and sometimes surprising value, all hiding in plain sight. The 1979 D. Lincoln cent was made in Denver during a time when America was going through big changes. Gas prices were high, inflation was rising, and the country was adjusting to a new economic reality after decades of post-war growth. In people's pockets, wallets, and coin jars, pennies like this one quietly moved from hand to hand, buying newspapers, candy bars, and cups of coffee that cost just a few cents. The Lincoln penny itself had already been around for 70 years by 1979. First introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln, it was the first U.S. coin to feature a real person instead of a symbolic figure like Liberty. That decision changed American coin design forever. By the time 1979 arrived, the Lincoln cent was one of the most familiar objects in the country, nearly invisible because of how common it seemed. The D mint mark on this penny tells us it was struck at the Denver Mint in Colorado. That tiny letter below the date may look insignificant, but to collectors, it's one of the most important details on the coin. In 1979, the Denver Mint produced over 4 billion pennies, an enormous number that reflects how much everyday change Americans were using at the time. At first glance, the 1979 D penny looks exactly like millions of others. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, wearing a calm, thoughtful expression. Above his head are the words "In God We Trust." In front of his face is the word "Liberty," and below is the date, followed by the small D mint mark. On the back, instead of Lincoln's memorial, which would appear later, you see two curved wheat stalks framing the words 1 cent and United States of America, with E pluribus unum across the top. This wheat design had been used since 1909 and would continue until 1958. But in 1979, the memorial reverse was already standard. So actually, the 1979 D penny features the Lincoln Memorial on the back, showing the famous building in Washington, D.C., with Lincoln's statue visible inside if you look closely. The metal composition of the 1979 penny is another important part of its story. Earlier Lincoln cents were made mostly from copper, but by the early 1980s, rising copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to switch to cheaper materials. In 1979, the penny was still 95% copper, with the remaining 5% made up of zinc and other metals. This makes it heavier than modern pennies and gives it that rich reddish-brown tone when well preserved. Now, you might be thinking, if billions were made, how could this coin be rare or valuable? And that's exactly what makes the 1979 D penny interesting. Most examples are worth only 1 or 2 cents in everyday condition. But hidden among the billions are rare varieties, mint heirs, and exceptionally preserved coins that collectors are willing to pay real money for. One of the most valuable versions of the 1979 D penny isn't about mistakes, it's about perfection. Coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being flawless. Most pennies never come close to that level. But a 1979 D penny in pristine condition, with full original luster and no visible marks, can be worth hundreds of dollars. In professional grading auctions, high-grade examples have sold for impressive amounts. Some 1979 D pennies graded at the very top levels have sold for over $1,000, not because they're old or made of precious metal, but because surviving in perfect condition is incredibly rare for a coin that was meant to be spent. Then there are mint errors, coins that were struck incorrectly at the mint. These mistakes turn ordinary pennies into collector treasures. One known error for 1979 D pennies includes off-center strikes, where the design is shifted toward the edge of the coin. These can sell for $50 to several $100s depending on how dramatic the shift is. Another valuable error is a doubled die, where part of the design appears doubled because the die used to strike the coin was misaligned during production. If the doubling is clear on the date, lettering, or Lincoln's profile, collectors become very interested. Some doubled die 1979 D pennies have sold for hundreds of dollars. There are also clipped planchets, where part of the coin is missing because the metal blank was improperly cut before striking. These coins look like a bite was taken out of the edge. Authentic clipped planchet errors from 1979 D can sell for $50 to $200 or more. Even coins with dramatic die cracks, where lines appear across the surface from a damaged die, can bring premiums if the crack is large or visually striking. These cracks tell the story of a die being used far beyond its normal lifespan, right before it was replaced. So how do you know if your 1979 D penny is real, valuable, or just a normal coin? First, check the date and mint mark. The D should appear just below the date on the front. The coin should weigh about 3.11 grams if it's the standard copper composition. A significantly different weight could suggest damage, alteration, or a rare wrong planchet error. Next, examine the surface closely. Look for doubling in the lettering or numbers, especially in Liberty, in God We Trust, and the date. True doubled die coins show clear separation, not blurry shadows. Blurry doubling is often just machine doubling, which adds little to no value. Check the edges and shape. A genuine clipped planchet will have smooth, curved missing areas, not sharp cuts or jagged edges. Also, the rim near the clip will usually look weak or incomplete because the metal didn't fully strike in that area. Be cautious of altered coins. Some people try to fake errors by filing edges, hammering surfaces, or modifying dates. Real mint errors usually show smooth, natural metal flow and consistent wear patterns. When in doubt, professional grading services can authenticate and grade your coin. Now let's talk about real-world value examples. A standard circulated 1979 D penny usually sells for 1 or 2 cents. In uncirculated condition, it might sell for 10 to 25 cents. But in high mint state grades, especially MS67 or higher, prices jump into the hundreds of dollars. One top-graded example sold at auction for over $1,000, a shocking amount for a coin many people wouldn't even bother picking up off the ground. Error coins bring even more excitement. A strong off-center strike might sell for $100. A dramatic doubled die could reach $300 to $600, and rare combinations of errors, such as a clipped planchet with doubling, can climb even higher. What makes this so fascinating is that these coins still turn up in everyday places. People find them in old coffee cans, piggy banks, estate collections, and inherited coin jars. Unlike ancient coins locked in museums, the 1979 D penny is still out there, hiding in drawers, jars, and forgotten rolls of change. Here's a fun fact. Pennies from 1979 are among the last Lincoln cents made almost entirely of copper, before the U.S. Mint switched to cheaper zinc cores in 1982. That means your 1979 D penny contains about 2 cents worth of copper by modern metal prices, more than its face value, even though melting coins is illegal. This alone gives the coin a unique place in U.S. monetary history. Another interesting detail is that 1979 was the year the Susan B. Anthony dollar was introduced, the first U.S. coin to honor a real woman. While the dollar coin struggled to gain public acceptance, the humble penny kept doing its job quietly, circulating everywhere without complaint. Collectors love the 1979 D penny not because it's flashy or ancient, but because it represents the everyday America of the late 1970s. It reminds people of newspaper machines, candy counters, and gas stations where change mattered. It's a snapshot of a time when a penny still had real buying power. And for collectors, it's a perfect example of how value isn't always about age or gold content. Sometimes it's about condition, rarity within mass production, and the story behind the strike. A coin made in the billions can still become rare when only a handful survive in perfect shape. This penny also attracts new collectors because it's affordable. You don't need thousands of dollars to start searching through rolls of coins. Anyone can look through their spare change and potentially discover something exciting. That sense of possibility is what keeps people hooked on coin collecting. There's also the thrill of the hunt. Knowing that valuable error coins can still appear in circulation makes every handful of change feel like a small treasure hunt. And sometimes, that hunt really does pay off. So the next time you see a 1979 D penny, don't dismiss it. Turn it over. Look at the details. Check the lettering. Study the edges. Because even though most are common, a few are anything but, and those rare survivors tell stories far bigger than their tiny size. The 1979 Denver Mint Lincoln penny reminds us that history doesn't always live in museums or behind glass. Sometimes it lives in our pockets. It lives in forgotten jars, old drawers, and coffee cans in basements. And sometimes it lives in a single copper coin that looks ordinary until you know what to look for. So if you have a jar of old pennies sitting somewhere right now, this might be your sign to take another look, because among them could be a small, copper piece of American history, and maybe even one worth far more than you ever imagined. And that's the magic of coin collecting. Every coin has a story, but some stories are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to notice them. Most people have held this penny in their hand and never thought twice about it. But what if I told you that one ordinary-looking coin from 1980 could be hiding a story worth hundreds, or even thousands of dollars? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you might be looking at your pocket change very differently. Today, we're talking about the 1980 No Mint Mark Lincoln penny. This is the 1-cent coin made in Philadelphia in 1980, carrying no mint mark under the date, just like many Lincoln cents before it. At first glance, it looks like a normal penny. Abraham Lincoln's familiar face on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back. Nothing flashy, nothing rare-looking. But behind this simple design is a fascinating story of change, mistakes, survival, and hidden value. To understand why this coin matters, we need to go back to the late 1970s and early 1980s. The United States was dealing with rising metal prices. Copper, in particular, was becoming more expensive. For decades, pennies had been made mostly of copper, about 95% copper with a little zinc mixed in. But by 1980, the cost of copper was getting so high that it was approaching the actual value of the coin itself. That created a big problem for the U.S. Mint. It cost more to make a penny than the penny was worth. So 1980 became one of the final years of the traditional copper penny. It was part of the last chapter in a long era of solid feeling, heavy cents that many Americans grew up with. Just 2 years later, in 1982, the mint would officially switch to zinc-based pennies coated in copper. But in 1980, the old copper formula was still in use. That alone gives this coin historical importance. It represents the end of something familiar in American money. The 1980 Lincoln penny was struck in 3 places: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia coins carry no mint mark, which is why collectors often call them no mint mark pennies. The Denver coins have a small d, and the San Francisco coins have an S and were usually made as proof coins for collectors. Today, we're focusing on the Philadelphia version, the everyday penny that millions of Americans use to buy candy, newspapers, and parking meters. On the front of the coin, you see Abraham Lincoln, based on a design first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. That made the Lincoln cent the first regular U.S. coin to feature a real person instead of a symbolic figure like Liberty. The portrait used in 1980 was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, and it had already been on pennies for over 70 years by that point. On the back is the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 to mark the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. If you look closely, you can even see Lincoln's statue inside the memorial between the columns. In 1980, over 7 billion Lincoln cents were struck in total across all mints, and more than 4 billion of those came from Philadelphia alone. That's a huge number, and at first glance, it might make you think these coins can't possibly be rare or valuable. But in the world of coin collecting, value isn't just about how many were made. It's about condition, survival, mistakes, and special varieties that escape the mint. One of the most interesting features of the 1980 no mint mark penny is its metal composition. It is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, and it weighs about 3.11 grams. That makes it noticeably heavier than modern pennies, which weigh only about 2.5 grams. If you drop a 1980 penny and a modern penny side by side, you can often hear and feel the difference. The older copper penny has a richer sound and a more solid feel. That weight difference is one of the easiest ways to identify whether a penny is copper or zinc. And for collectors, copper pennies are often more desirable because they represent an older era and have better long-term durability. Copper doesn't corrode the same way zinc does, which means copper pennies tend to survive in better condition over time. Now, let's talk about something collectors love even more than history: errors and varieties. Most 1980 pennies look exactly the same, but some don't, and those differences can mean serious money. One known variety is the 1980 doubled die penny. A doubled die happens when the coin die receives a misaligned impression during the manufacturing process, causing certain letters or numbers to appear doubled. On some 1980 pennies, collectors have found doubling in the date, the word liberty, or the motto "In God We Trust." To the naked eye, it might look like blurry lettering, but under magnification, the doubling becomes clear. Another interesting error type includes off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and broad strikes. These errors happen when the blank coin planchet isn't positioned correctly in the press, or when the metal strip is cut improperly. Some 1980 pennies were struck off-center, meaning part of the design is missing, while the rest is clearly visible. Others show curved clips missing from the edge of the coin. These mistakes turn ordinary pennies into collectible pieces because each error is unique. There are also pennies with weak strikes or missing details, and even coins struck on wrong planchets, though those are extremely rare. In a few documented cases, collectors have found Lincoln cents struck on foreign coin blanks or experimental metal blanks. While these are incredibly uncommon, they are among the most valuable types of mint errors. So why would a common 1980 penny be valuable at all? The key is condition. Most 1980 pennies were used in daily transactions and ended up scratched, dirty, or worn down. Finding one today in perfect or near-perfect condition is surprisingly difficult. Coins are graded on a scale that goes from heavily worn to mint state, which means they look exactly the way they did when they left the mint. A typical circulated 1980 no mint mark penny is usually worth just 1 cent. But a mint state example with full original luster, sharp details, and no damage can be worth significantly more. In uncirculated condition, these pennies can sell for anywhere from a few dollars to over $20, depending on how high the grade is. But when you move into the highest grades, things get really interesting. Professional grading services have certified some 1980 no mint mark pennies as MS67 or higher. That means they are nearly flawless under magnification. Coins like this are incredibly rare because so few pennies survive in that condition after decades of circulation, storage, and handling. At auction, top-grade 1980 pennies have sold for hundreds of dollars. In some cases, exceptionally well-preserved examples have crossed the $1,000 mark, especially when there are very few coins at that grade level in existence. That's a shocking jump from 1 cent to 4 figures, and it all comes down to preservation and rarity within condition. Error coins can sell for even more. A verified double-die 1980 penny can sell anywhere from $50 to several $100s depending on the strength of the doubling and the coin's condition. Major off-center strikes or dramatic clips can bring similar prices. And extremely rare wrong planchet errors can sell for thousands, sometimes more, depending on the metal and how well the error is documented. So how do you know if the 1980 penny in your pocket or jar is something special? First, check the date and mint mark. If it says 1980 and there's no letter under the date, that means it was made in Philadelphia and qualifies as a no mint mark penny. Next, weigh the coin if you can. A copper penny from 1980 should weigh around 3.11 grams. If it's significantly lighter, it might be damaged or something unusual, and that's worth further inspection. Then look closely at the lettering and numbers using a magnifying glass or phone camera zoom. Check the date, the word Liberty, and the motto In God We Trust for signs of doubling or strange shapes. Doubling often looks like a shadow image slightly offset from the main design. Next, examine the edges and overall shape of the coin. If the coin looks off-center, unusually thick, thin, or clipped, that could indicate a mint error. Also, look for missing details, strange textures, or unusual colors that don't match typical copper pennies. If you think you've found something special, resist the urge to clean it. Cleaning a coin almost always lowers its value, even if it looks dirty or dark. Collectors prefer natural surfaces, and cleaning can permanently damage the metal and destroy its appeal. Now let's talk about some fun and surprising facts about the 1980 penny. One surprising detail is that 1980 pennies are among the last coins many people remember as feeling real or solid. When the switch to zinc happened in the early 1980s, many Americans noticed that pennies suddenly felt lighter and sounded different. Some people even thought the new pennies felt cheaper, even though their face value was the same. That sensory change made older copper pennies, including those from 1980, more nostalgic over time. Another interesting fact is that during the copper shortage years, some people hoarded pennies, believing copper prices would keep rising. In theory, the metal value of a copper penny can sometimes approach or even exceed 1 cent, though melting pennies for copper is illegal in the United States. Still, this belief led many people to save jars and boxes of precious 1,982 pennies, including millions from 1980. That hoarding behavior is part of why so many still exist today. Here's another surprising detail. The Lincoln Memorial reverse design used in 1980 would soon disappear. In 2009, the U.S. Mint replaced it with special designs honoring Lincoln's life, and later introduced the Union Shield design in 2010. That makes the Lincoln Memorial pennies, including 1980, part of a completed design era that ran from 1959 to 2008. For collectors, complete design eras are especially appealing. Collectors also love the 1980 penny because it sits at a turning point in American coinage history. It represents the final years of traditional copper composition and the closing chapter of a familiar manufacturing process. It's not just a coin. It's a symbol of change in how money is made. For beginners, the 1980 no mint mark penny is also a perfect entry point into collecting. It's affordable, widely available, and easy to recognize. You don't need expensive equipment or deep technical knowledge to start searching through rolls or jars for high-quality examples or interesting errors. That accessibility makes it a favorite among casual collectors and serious hobbyists alike. Some collectors enjoy building complete Lincoln cent sets, and the 1980 penny is a required date. Others focus on mint state examples, trying to find the cleanest possible coin from circulation. Still others specialize in error coins and search through thousands of pennies, hoping to spot that one unusual strike that everyone else missed. In all of these cases, the 1980 penny plays an important role. What makes this coin especially exciting is the idea that valuable examples could still be out there. Unlike rare gold coins or early silver dollars that mostly sit in collections or museums, 1980 pennies are still found in everyday places. They're in old jars, dresser drawers, piggy banks, and forgotten coffee cans. Some are still sitting in rolls that haven't been opened in decades. That means there's always a chance, however small, that someone could stumble across a high-grade or error example without even realizing it. That sense of possibility is what drives so many people to search through coins. It's not just about money. It's about discovery. It's about holding a small piece of history in your hand and realizing that even something as common as a penny can tell a story of national change, industrial challenge, and human error. So the next time you see a 1980 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it. Take a closer look. Feel its weight. Study its details. Ask yourself where it's been and how it survived more than 4 decades of circulation. And remember that while most are only worth 1 cent, a few are worth far more, not just in dollars but in the story they carry. Because sometimes, the most ordinary objects hide the most unexpected value. And sometimes, the next great find isn't locked in a vault or buried underground. Sometimes, it's already sitting in your pocket, waiting for you to notice it. So keep checking your change, keep asking questions, and keep your curiosity alive. You never know when a simple penny might turn out to be something extraordinary. Most people would never guess that a penny sitting quietly in a jar, drawer, or old wallet could hold a hidden story. But today, we're talking about a single coin that millions of Americans have touched, spent, and forgotten. The 1988 no mint mark Lincoln penny. And what makes this everyday coin fascinating isn't just what it looks like, but what might be hiding in plain sight. The 1988 no mint mark Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin produced by the United States Mint in Philadelphia. When a penny has no mint mark, it usually means it was made there. In 1988, billions of pennies were struck, and most of them passed through countless hands without anyone giving them a second thought. But some of these coins carry special traits, unusual errors, or pristine conditions that collectors actively search for today. This coin features the familiar image of President Abraham Lincoln on the front, a design that had been in use since 1909, making it the longest-running portrait on any U.S. coin. On the back, it shows the Lincoln Memorial, which was used from 1959 until 2008. To most people, this penny looks ordinary, but to collectors, even common-looking coins can become treasures under the right conditions. To understand why the 1988 penny exists, we need to step back into American history. By the late 1980s, the U.S. economy was stable, cash was king, and everyday transactions relied heavily on coins. The penny was still essential for vending machines, parking meters, pay phones, and daily purchases. That year, the U.S. Mint produced billions of cents to meet demand, with the Philadelphia Mint alone striking over 5 billion pennies. But something else was happening behind the scenes. The composition of the penny had already changed a few years earlier. Before 1982, pennies were mostly made of copper, but rising copper prices made it too expensive to keep using solid copper. So the mint switched to a zinc core coated with a thin layer of copper. By 1988, this new composition was standard, and nearly every penny weighed less and felt slightly different than older coins, even if most people didn't notice. The 1988 penny reflects a turning point in American coinage, where practicality and cost-saving replaced tradition. That alone makes it historically interesting, even before we talk about rarity or value. Let's take a closer look at the coin itself. On the front, Lincoln faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1988 on the right. On Philadelphia minted coins, there is no letter under the date. That absence is intentional not an error, and it tells us where the coin was made. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands tall, with United States of America at the top, 1 cent at the bottom, and E pluribus unum above the building. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, making this one of the most detailed designs ever used on a U.S. coin. The coin weighs about 2.5 grams and measures 19 millimeters across. It's made of 97.5% zinc and 2.5% copper plating. That thin copper layer gives it its familiar reddish color, but underneath, it's mostly zinc, which is why newer pennies corrode more easily when damaged. So why would anyone care about a penny that was made by the billions? The answer lies in condition, rarity within the common, and unusual errors. Most 1988 pennies are worth exactly 1 cent. But collectors don't just collect coins. They collect history, condition, and imperfections. And that's where this coin starts to get interesting. Some 1988 no-mint mark pennies were struck in exceptionally high quality, especially those preserved in mint condition, never spent, never scratched, and never exposed to moisture. These coins can earn high grades from professional grading services, such as MS67 or higher. Coins at this level are rare, not because few were made, but because few survived without damage. Then there are error coins, which are the real stars of the collecting world. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the minting process. For 1988 pennies, known errors include off-center strikes, double strikes, clipped planchets, and die cracks. Some coins show doubling on letters or numbers, where parts of the design appear twice due to misalignment during striking. One of the most sought-after errors is the double die variety, where the date or lettering looks slightly doubled when viewed closely. These are not common, and when authentic, they can be worth far more than face value. Another interesting variety involves weak strikes or missing details, especially on Lincoln's hair, beard, or the steps of the memorial. While minor wear reduces value, unusual minting flaws can increase it significantly. So how much can a 1988 no-mint mark penny actually be worth? In circulated condition, meaning it's been used and shows wear, most examples are worth 1 cent. Maybe 2 or 3 cents if someone needs one to complete a set. But in uncirculated condition, values rise quickly. A bright, untouched 1988 penny graded MS65 might sell for a few dollars. At MS67 or MS68, prices can reach into the tens or even hundreds of dollars. Some auction records show top-grade examples selling for over $100, especially when certified by major grading companies. Error coins can sell for much more. A genuine double die or dramatic off-center strike can sell anywhere from $50 to several $100s, depending on the severity and visibility of the error. There have even been rare cases where collectors paid over $1,000 for a nearly perfect example or a major error variety from this year, proving that even a modern penny can become a serious collectible. Now, how do you tell if your 1988 penny is special or just another coin? First, check the date and mint mark area. If there is no letter under the date, it means it was made in Philadelphia. That's normal. Next, look at the condition. Is the coin bright and shiny with full detail on Lincoln's face and the memorial, or is it dark, scratched, and worn flat? The better the condition, the better the chance of collector interest. Then examine the coin under magnification. Look closely at the numbers in the date and the letters in Liberty and In God We Trust. If any appear doubled, thicker than normal, or slightly offset, that could indicate a double die. Check the edges for unusual shapes or missing sections, which could point to a clipped planchet. Also look at the center of the design. If the image is noticeably off-center or part of the design is missing, that's another possible error. These coins should not be cleaned, polished, or altered, as that lowers their value dramatically. It's important to remember that many damaged coins look unusual but are not mint errors. Scratches, corrosion, and dents from circulation don't increase value. True mint errors happen during the manufacturing process and usually show smooth, natural metal flow instead of rough damage. One fun fact about the 1988 penny is that it was minted during a time when cash was still dominant in daily life. Credit cards were common but not everywhere, and digital payments didn't exist. Pennies were used constantly in everyday transactions, from grocery stores to arcade machines. This makes surviving mint condition examples even more impressive, because most coins from that year were heavily circulated. Another interesting detail is that 1988 was just 1 year before major changes in coin collecting culture. In the 1990s, third-party grading became widespread, transforming how collectors viewed modern coins. That means many high-grade 1988 pennies were saved later, but not nearly as many as earlier decades, when people didn't think modern coins would ever be collectible. Collectors today also enjoy building complete Lincoln cent sets, often stretching from 1909 to 2008 or beyond. For these collectors, a flawless 1988 no-mint mark penny is an essential piece. Even though the coin itself isn't rare in general terms, finding one in near-perfect condition becomes a challenge. There's also nostalgia attached to this coin. Many people who grew up in the late 1980s and early 1990s remember these pennies in school lunch lines, vending machines, and coin jars at home. Holding one today can feel like holding a small piece of everyday American history. Another surprising detail is how much attention collectors pay to tiny details most people overlook. The sharpness of Lincoln's beard, the clarity of the memorial steps, the strength of the lettering, and even the color tone of the copper plating all matter. A single point difference in grading can change a coin's value dramatically. Collectors also love this coin because it represents the era just before the Lincoln Memorial reverse was retired. In 2009, the design changed to commemorate Lincoln's life stages, and then in 2010, the Union Shield design replaced the memorial. That makes the 1988 penny part of the final decades of one of the most iconic coin designs in U.S. history. There's something special about knowing that a coin you might have spent on candy or dropped between couch cushions could one day be worth far more than its face value, simply because it survived in better condition than most. So why does the 1988 no-mint mark penny still matter today? Because it reminds us that history isn't always locked in museums or hidden in vaults. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in a pocket, a drawer, or a jar of loose change. It shows that even the most ordinary objects can carry stories, value, and surprises when you look closely enough. For collectors, it's a chance to hunt for perfection, errors, and hidden gems. For everyday people, it's an invitation to take a second look at what they already own. And for history lovers, it's a small but meaningful piece of America's everyday past. So the next time you come across a penny dated 1988 with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Turn it over. Look at the details. Check the condition. You never know if you're holding a common cent or a coin that quietly stood apart from the billions made just like it. And that's what makes coin collecting so exciting. Not just the rare gold pieces or ancient treasures, but the possibility that something extraordinary could be hiding in the most ordinary place of all your pocket change. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second glance. But what if I told you that one small detail on a 2007 Lincoln cent could turn an ordinary coin into something collectors actively search for today? This is the 2007 D Mint Mark Lincoln penny, a coin that millions of Americans have held in their hands without ever realizing what makes it special. At first glance, it looks like just another modern cent. But behind its simple design is a fascinating story about American history, metal shortages, minting changes, and rare mistakes that can make certain examples surprisingly valuable. Let's take a closer look at what this coin really is. The 2007 D Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries the small d below the date on the front of the coin. It features the famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front, a design that has appeared on U.S. cents since 1909, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. On the back, you'll find the Lincoln Memorial, a design used from 1959 through 2008. In other words, this penny belongs to the final era of the classic Lincoln Memorial cent. Just 1 year later, in 2009, the design would change to celebrate Lincoln's 200th birthday. That alone gives the 2007 penny an important place in modern coin history. But there's much more to this coin than its place in the timeline. To understand why the 2007 D penny exists, we need to look at what was happening in the United States in the mid-2000s. During this time, the cost of metals, especially copper, was rising sharply. For decades, pennies had already stopped being made of solid copper. Since 1982, most U.S. cents have been made with a core of zinc coated in a thin layer of copper. By 2007, the U.S. Mint was under growing pressure because the metal inside a penny was getting close to costing more than 1 cent to produce. Even so, the penny remained deeply symbolic in American culture, and Congress had not approved its removal or redesign. So the Mint continued striking Lincoln cents in huge numbers, including the 2007 D penny, which was part of everyday life for millions of Americans. These coins were used to buy candy, pay for parking meters, and sit forgotten in jars and drawers across the country. Yet, within those massive production numbers, something interesting was happening. The Denver Mint struck over 3 billion pennies in 2007. That's billion with a B, so on the surface, this coin seems extremely common, and most examples are indeed worth just 1 cent. But collectors know that rarity isn't always about how many coins were made. Sometimes it's about condition. Other times it's about small errors that slip through quality control. And sometimes it's about a coin marking the end of an era. That's exactly where the 2007 D penny begins to stand out. Let's talk about its design and features. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the word Liberty to the left and the date 2007 to the right. Just below the date is the small d, which tells us it was struck in Denver. Along the top edge are the words "In God We Trust." On the back, you see the Lincoln Memorial, with a tiny statue of Lincoln visible between the columns if you look closely. Above it are the words United States of America, and below it is 1 cent, with E pluribus unum above the memorial. The coin weighs 2.5 grams and is made mostly of zinc, with a thin copper coating that gives it its familiar orange-brown color. Its diameter is about 19 millimeters, the same size as other modern Lincoln cents. But here's where things get interesting. Some 2007 D pennies were struck with unusual errors. And in the coin world, errors are where ordinary coins can suddenly become extraordinary. One of the most popular error types on this coin is the off-center strike. This happens when the blank coin isn't perfectly positioned during striking, causing part of the design to be missing or shifted. Some 2007 D off-center pennies show dramatic misalignment and can sell for $50, $100, or more depending on how off-center they are and whether the date is still visible. Another error collectors look for is the broad strike, where the coin is struck without the collar that normally shapes its edge. These coins come out wider and flatter than normal and can bring solid premiums in the collector market. Then there are doubled dies. These occur when the coin die receives a misaligned impression during manufacturing, causing parts of the design to appear doubled. On some 2007 D pennies, collectors have found doubling in the letters of Liberty, the date, or In God We Trust. Strong doubled dies can sell for hundreds of dollars, especially in high condition. There are also clipped planchets, where part of the coin blank is missing before striking, leaving a curved or straight missing section. And occasionally, Coins struck on the wrong metal planchet surface, such as a blank intended for another denomination, which can lead to dramatic weight differences and high values. But even without errors, the 2007 D penny has another path to collector value: condition. Most pennies from circulation are scratched, worn, and dull, but coins that survive in pristine, uncirculated condition, especially those graded by professional grading services, can be worth far more than face value. High-grade examples of the 2007 D penny, especially those graded MS67 or higher, have sold for surprising prices. Some have reached $50, $100, and, in exceptional cases, even more at auction, simply because so few survive in perfect condition after years of circulation. That's the secret most people don't realize. It's not just the age of a coin that matters. It's how well it was preserved. Let's look at some real-world value examples. In recent years, certified 2007 D Lincoln cents graded MS67 read by professional services like PCGS and NGC have sold in the $40 to $120 range at auction. A few exceptional examples in top population grades have sold for even higher, especially when competition among collectors is strong. Error examples tell an even more dramatic story. A strong double-die 2007 D penny can sell for several $100s. Broad strikes and major off-center strikes often sell between $75 and $250, depending on eye appeal. Rare wrong planchet errors can go much higher, sometimes into the four-figure range. So while the average 2007 D penny in your pocket is worth exactly 1 cent, certain versions of this same coin can be worth more than a tank of gas, a grocery trip, or even a weekend vacation. That's why collectors continue searching through rolls, jars, and old coin collections looking for hidden gems. But how can you tell if you have a real 2007 D penny that might be valuable? First, check the date and mint mark. Look for the year 2007 and the small d beneath the date on the front of the coin. That confirms it was struck in Denver. Next, look at the condition. If the coin looks bright, shiny, and nearly flawless, with no wear on Lincoln's hair or cheek and no dullness on the high points of the design, it may be uncirculated. Those are the coins worth closer inspection. Then use a magnifying glass to look closely at the letters and numbers. Check Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date for signs of doubling, thickness, or shadow-like outlines. True doubling will look raised and rounded, not flat or smeared. Check the edges and shape of the coin. If it looks wider than normal, thinner than normal, clipped, or off-center, it may be an error coin. You can also weigh the coin. A normal 2007 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it weighs significantly more or less, that could indicate a wrong planchet or missing metal. As for fakes, modern pennies like this are rarely counterfeited, but altered coins do exist. Some people artificially damage coins to make them look like errors. Real mint errors usually show smooth, natural metal flow and consistent surfaces. If you're unsure, professional coin dealers or grading services can help authenticate your coin. Now, let's talk about some fun and surprising facts about the 2007 D penny. This coin was struck during one of the most debated periods in penny history, when many economists argued that the penny should be eliminated entirely because it cost more to produce than its face value. In fact, in 2007, it cost about 1.7 cents to make a penny. That means every time someone used a penny, the government technically lost money on its production. Another fun detail is that 2007 was one of the final full years of the Lincoln Memorial reverse design. In 2009, the Mint replaced it with 4 special designs showing different stages of Lincoln's life. Then in 2010, the shield design took over, which remains in use today. So the 2007 D penny represents the closing chapter of a nearly 50-year-long design era that began in 1959. Also, while billions were made, many of them have already disappeared from circulation due to damage, corrosion, or simply being lost. High-grade examples are becoming harder to find each year, especially bright red coins that haven't darkened or toned. Collectors love this coin not because it's ancient, but because it's familiar. It reminds people of everyday life in the early 2000s, when cash was still king, and pennies still mattered in change drawers and tip jars. There's something powerful about holding a coin you once spent on candy or coffee, and realizing it might now be worth far more than you ever imagined. Collectors also love the hunt. The idea that a rare error or top-grade example could still be hiding in circulation makes searching through pennies exciting. It's one of the few hobbies where you can start with pocket change and potentially uncover something truly special. And unlike rare gold coins or ancient artifacts locked away in museums, the 2007 D penny is accessible. Anyone can find one. Anyone can look. Anyone can learn. That's what makes it so appealing. This coin also represents a moment of transition in American coinage, when rising metal costs forced the mint to rethink how money is made. It sits at the edge of change, right before major design updates and ongoing debates about the future of the penny itself. So whether you're a seasoned collector or someone who just dumped a jar of change on your kitchen table, the 2007 D Lincoln penny is worth a second look. Because history isn't always hidden in ancient artifacts or dusty museum cases. Sometimes it's sitting quietly in your pocket, waiting to be noticed. And who knows? The next time you find a 2007 penny with a small D under the date, you might be holding more than just 1 cent. You might be holding a tiny piece of American history, a rare mint error, or a high-grade survivor that escaped years of wear and tear. So before you toss your spare change aside, take a closer look. That ordinary-looking penny might just have an extraordinary story to tell.